workshop meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. Today is April 27th. It is 2 p.m. We try to have these meetings on a monthly basis on the fourth Wednesday of the month, and that's what it is today. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This will be both a physical meeting location and a virtual meeting per Washington Proclamation 20-28. Members of city staff are participating via teleconference. We have one of our counselors, Counselor Tara Heisen, who is also being part of the meeting virtually, and certainly members of our city staff, as I mentioned, are also on teleconference. Guests that are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda item as appropriate. Today's meeting may be viewed live via YouTube and on cable channel 10, HD 1090. My only comments today are that we have no action items on today's agenda, so I will not ask our city clerk to call the roll. We have been contacted by both Mayor Pro Tem Munns, who is out of the country, as a matter of fact, and then also Councilmember Marshall, who will not be able to attend today. So can you hear us out there, Councilmember Heisen?
I can.
Oh, great. Okay, welcome, and welcome to our other city councilors here. We have Councilor Evans, Councilor Wiesner, Councilor Stuckey, and Councilor Hoffmeyer, and then our city clerk, Julie Lindsay. So with all that said, I'd like to start on our agenda today, which begins with administration item, first presentation, Washington Water Trails, camping in Windjammer Park. And I think for that, I'm going to turn to our city administrator, Blaine Oborn. Mr. Oborn?
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Blaine Oborn, Oak Harbor City Administrator, and if we could bring the slide up. Mikhail's got it in the background. And also I have with me from the Washington Water Trails Association, Andre Hurley, and so she'll kind of be able to, we're going to kind of do I kind of developed it, but she has a lot of expertise and a lot of experience and knowledge with water trails and this issue. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Just a little history, a lot of history. City has a long history of allowing Windjammer Park, or prior to that was City Beach, named as part of the Washington Water Trails for non-motorized boating, kayaks and canoes and rowboats. And then the issue kind of started in May 21st, 2019, when the city banned all camping in city parks and did not allow any exceptions such as for the Washington Water Trails for non-motorized vehicles. If you go to the next slide, kind of gives you the, this is from the Water Trails, Washington Water Trails Association website, showing Oak Harbor City Park as a location as part of the trails. And so, and it's an important part. There's a long leg there where there's not any camping area, so it's critical, and in talking to Andre, that Ms. Hurley, that we have this spot here. So going to the next slide is the location there, right by Beeksma. I think the neighbors are kind of used to the kayaking there, I was told, and fine with it. And even though the grass has been done, it's pretty much the same location it just doesn't have the showers and the other things you could use when we had an RV park. But it would be at the same location there, right at the bottom there, is where we were talking about doing that. So with that, next slide. So what we're talking about tonight is to request or see the council is amenable to amending the code. And Andre has some history here. She was showing me another city that has exceptions, and that city was La Conner, and they allow for the non-motorized boats and also for special events. So it made sense, if we're going to amend the code, to go ahead and amend it, because I know we've had special events going on sometimes, and we've been hesitant to allow the camping in there. So those would be the two exceptions there. And then once we if the council goes ahead and amends the agreement, or amends the municipal code, then we would go and follow through and update the very outdated or pretty old agreement we have with Washington Water Trails Association for their usage. And then we can we talk to the police chief, there's ways that they can tell us when people are there, so we can tell it's people that are part of the trail, because we're not going to open this up as a camping spot for just anybody. It's people that are using the water trails, and that's the exception we want to do. So with that, not a lot of detail. Next slide, please. Ms. Hurley's here to answer any questions and provide any input and add anything to the discussions. And then, assuming council's okay, then we'll go ahead and proceed with next steps, amending the code and then the agreement. So you're welcome, Ms. Hurley, to add anything to my comments here and just talk about the need for it. I know you have a lot of passion for this sport, and in talking to you, I really appreciate that. So go right ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, and thanks for having us over here. I've been kayaking since 1984, believe it or not. When I went to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, I got into the backpacking club and leadership program, and that one thing led to another. And I used to work at Lakeside School, for example, in their wilderness leadership program. And at the time, we would go out and use this Cascadia Marine Trail that we're talking about now. And we would do 8-day trips, usually starting on Lopez Island and going all the way out to Stewart. And so that's when I became aware of the Cascadia Marine Trail. And it was developed by Tom Steinburn back in the 90s. He was a Boeing engineer, and he noticed that private land is being bought up around the coast. And so people need not only access to the water, but they need a place to stop, use the restroom, lunch break, spend the night, that sort of thing. And so that's how the Cascadia Marine Trail was developed. And I don't know if you can call up our website on your monitor over there. Just to show you quickly, it's www.ta.org. Pretty simple. And so safety does have a lot to do with it. I was just looking over at Fire Chief Merrill. I was actually in the Port Townsend Fire Department, believe it or not, on the boat crew. And we used to go out and practice picking up kayakers because there's so many accidents. As a matter of fact, there was 2 deaths in Oregon, I think, yesterday. So the Cascadia Marine Trail is actually a little bit of a safety net for people who are human-powered craft. Thank you. And then it says trails on the first tab, and scroll down to Cascadia Marine Trail, please. There we go. So if you look at this page, you'll even notice that now Governor Inslee endorsed this back a long time ago. And he used to come to all of our dinner auctions. We're also a national millennial trail, so it's not just, local, where it's national. And you can click through and see all the different sites. And if you scroll down all the way, you can actually see a full map of the trail. Maybe go up a little bit, and it says PDF. So I updated this recently. So those are all of our sites. I always like to say it goes from the capital to Canada. And like I said, it's been in existence since 1990. And so one of my jobs, I was the president, and then they asked me to be the executive director. And one of my jobs is to go around and talk to all the land managers. And we have a big memorandum of understanding with Washington State Parks, too. So most of our sites are on the Washington State Park lands. But then we also have San Juan Island County, or San Juan County parks, and just all over. There's just land managers all over the place that I need to keep in touch with these days. Does anyone have any questions?
So I have a question. I am familiar with, that and being a part of our park for many years. It doesn't look like it gets used very often. Do you see a do you have a larger number of people now using these? And just, assuming that council, and I'm guessing that we forgot about you guys when we made,
That's what we
when we
heard.
made the decision, because I know it has been in existence for years and years and years, but I also know, as I mentioned, that it doesn't get used very often. And just wondered if you're seeing more. I mean, you have a number of places here, and I had no idea that you could potentially kayak from Olympia to the Canadian border. But it certainly looks like you could if you were in shape enough to be able to do that and smart enough to be able to stay on top of the water. So is it growing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's always growing. As a matter of fact, there's a group, I just forgot the name, of disabled veterans from Britain who were planning to come and paddle from Olympia all the way up the Inside Passage, to Ketchikan. And so I was helping them out. I have to admit that a lot of our more popular sites are, rugged on islands, without any access to cars. Anderson Island down in the South Sound is one of our most accessed sites. So people put in all over the, there, and they go spend the 1 or 2 nights. They're really only allowed to spend 1 night on Anderson Island. And then, of course, the San Juans. And I also have a little bit of a tech background, so with the help of our current president, we implemented Salesforce, the database. Not sure if you've heard of that, but I just love it. And so I've been soliciting our membership. Well, I have an email list of about 3,500 people, and then we have members, I think they're totaling 800 to 900 right now. But so they can input on the website. As a matter of fact, you could probably see it if you went to, I think it's volunteers, the volunteers tab. You can actually input where you went and what you did. Did you do trash cleanup? Did you spend the night? Et cetera, et cetera. And so this goes into our total number of hours that in the future we can use for grant writing. So Oak Harbor, I have to admit, isn't used all that often, which is maybe a good thing for you because, people will come every so often when they want to resupply. It has that reputation. You can walk into town, get more groceries, eat, etc. And evidently the neighbor loves handing out cookies to the kayakers. This is what we were alluding to earlier. And also when I talked to Chief, is it Dresker?
Yeah.
He asked me to,
Just came in.
he asked me to put a reservation system up, so I did. And so if you would go back to Oak Harbor, you would see that that's already been implemented on the website. Our website's a WordPress website, so it's easy to put different plugins there. Up to Cascadia Marine Trail again. And then scroll down to Oak Harbor. And I did start updating the webpage after we had our last meeting, but you see the little calendar? People can make reservations there.
Councilor Evans.
So if somebody makes a reservation on the site, then the police department will be notified of that reservation?
Well, I think the idea was if they came down to see who was camping, then they could ask if they had a reservation. And, and then we'd also put a QR code there, I think we talked about.
Yeah, so if there's an issue, or something like that, we know who to have a conversation with to find out what.
And Chief, do you have any concerns about this?
No, I think that we
Do
addressed
you,
them,
do you mind coming up? Sorry.
no, I think we addressed them when we had our meetings. There was a couple things, and then we did a revised, and I don't know if that document's been forwarded. A revised thing, I put my input in there, and back when we talked legal, one of them was this, just because, we wanted to know who was staying there in case something went on. And in case our officers went down there and talked with somebody, and they said, hey, we've done this, we could go and check and see. Although it's not automatically sent to us, we would be able to do that through some research. So there was a couple of hypothetical complications that could always be a hypothetical complication, but if we worry about those, we never do anything. So I think to our satisfaction, we're good with this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or input? Okay, seeing, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Stuckey.
Just a couple. You had mentioned one of the islands, I forgot the name, that you said was the most commonly visited one. And maybe I misheard you, but I thought you said people stayed for 2 or 3 days, even though they were only allowed to stay for 1.
Oh, I was talking about Anderson Island in particular.
But the rule is they stay for 1, yet they're staying for longer. So who enforces the rules?
Well, I approve them, so I read the notes, and if they want to stay for 2 and there's no complications, then I will let them on Anderson Island. So if they just want to stay for 1, then, and the law or the rule is at a certain site, then I wouldn't allow it.
And maintaining the site falls on.
We maintain the sites, although you're, I just forgot his name, your Parks Department director that left,
Hank Neidham.
Hank Needham. Yeah.
Hank. Hank was really supportive, and so Hank, he maintained the site. He, as a matter of fact, took out the noxious weeds that were there and replanted the grass. And we had a meeting, and just before he left, and we discussed putting in a different kind of a sign, sort of a more modern sign that, down there. And it just really depends. We've got one over at Meadowdale County Park, and that ranger lives in the park, and he just loves it. He goes down, he visits everybody. He's got a log that goes back about 30 years, and he maintains it, and he embellishes on the sign. And then other sites, well, I just went over to Alla Spit. That's one of our sites. And that one needs a lot of work. You know, there's a tree fort built at this park, and not much place to camp over there. So, you know, it really just depends on who's in charge.
And there hasn't been any, I can't foresee, this is probably one of those hypotheticals Chief was talking about, but homeless encampments at all, I mean, has that been an issue at all? I mean, it's kind of off the beaten path. I wouldn't think there would be an issue, but.
No, we had a little issue. It was interesting out at Skagit Island, which is near Deception Pass. Got a call from a motorboater who was trying just to call anybody, and I was the only one that answered the phone, evidently, and somebody was out there. They had set up a pop-up tent and completely littered the beach and whatnot, so there was not much I could do, but I ended up getting hold of the rangers at Deception Pass State Park because they're in charge of Skagit Island, and, you know, but that's the only complaint I've had.
Well, I just wanted to comment on it too. That's kind of why we set that reservation system in there, which isn't normal, I think, for what they do. And also part of the stuff that I inputted on the rule sheet or the agreement, which I assume is still in there, and I don't have that final version, but I think it is, along with the number of days, and I think it even mentions in there, I think, about you got to arrive by boat. So I can't remember. So there's some things in there that we specifically did because of that and other potential problems. So those are,
I had a feeling that.
within the reason of what we felt we could do and still allow this to be utilized in the fashion that is worthwhile for this time.
Yeah, so I think the key here is we're still going to have a ban on camping. We're just going to allow 2 exceptions. And so for this organization would be 1 exception coming in on kayak and then for special events.
I believe, Blaine, did we leave a 30-day out in that agreement, or is there some kind of an out in that agreement?
We can still work on the agreement. I want to make sure that they're okay in amending the code first, and then we can kind of tweak the agreement and come back to the council and update them on it.
And there is an out in the standard agreement, you know, the original draft.
Councillor Hoffmeyer?
Thank you for taking the time to bring this to council. Really like this plan here, and just wanted to commend you for, you know, going through the process, you know, getting it lined up with Blaine, talking with Chief Dresker, alleviating the concerns that we would have had. You know, I think as a city and as a council, we quite often we spend quite a bit of money under the guise of, well, this is going to bring people to town. And quite often it never does. This is something that cost us nearly $0, and it will bring people to town. So thank you very much, and to your kayaking sidekick that you brought with you today as well. Nice to see you, Bill.
I'd like to thank Bill, because if it weren't for Bill, I probably wouldn't have gotten to know a few people here, and I've known Bill for a long time, maybe 30 years.
Good people.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hurley and Bill. Thank you for coming. And looks like we're Set to move forward. We will then go on to our next item on our agenda. Falls under Development Services, starting with item A, zoning code revisions, temporary gravel roads, and parking lots. And we have Mr. Cool from our Development Services, our director. Dave Cool.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about gravel roads and gravel parking lots. This is a possible solution to challenges we might have on our large regional park. So, a number of points we'd like to make before we get started. Gravel parking lots is what we'll start with, and then we'll move on to gravel roads. First, it's considered a low-impact development technique, which means it's environmentally friendly. It can be installed with in-house resources, which means our staff and the Public Works Department can do this. It also meets ADA requirements. The Planning Commission, when we showed this to them, they asked the question if it met ADA, and we did some research to find that, in fact, it does. There's little or no off-site runoff with this technique. So rain coming out of the sky will hit the parking lot and be able to drain. It does not alter existing groundwater flows, and no storm system is required for the conveyance or detention of water. So you don't need to put in a detention basin or a retention basin. There's a low maintenance cost to this technique, and it's easily expandable. In addition, you can be a permanent solution for parking lots versus paved if you want. This is an estimated cost, and I have to give credit to our former Public Works Interim Director, Mick Munkin. He put together some of this information. Technically, on the left, a gravel grid concept would run about $13 a square foot, and the asphalt pavement concept is about $18. And you can see the little asterisk down there. It means including all the site preparation, all the grading, all the different drainage techniques you're using, curbing, landscaping, signage, and permitting. So this covers everything that could possibly go into a parking lot. I've looked up online, and the actual cost for asphalt surfacing just to put in a parking lot is about $7 a square foot. So this includes everything. So you can see that there's a difference between the low cost of $13 a square foot, the high cost of $20 a square foot to do this, as opposed to asphalt, which is estimated to be about $18 on the low side and about $45 on the high side. This is what it looks like. You can see on the left-hand side of the picture, it's a grid pattern. It's a high-strength plastic. And you can see on the actual screen there where there's these grids and the gravel fills in. You can see this area back behind here by this dumpster is like actual gravel. You can see how that would wear out over time, whereas this stuff is very durable. You can see that truck is parked right there, and these lane markings, and it sets up real nice. This does not show up very well, but on the left-hand side, you can see this is water coming out of the sky into the grid, down through the porous gravel. You can see these arrows down below, which will run water through it very easily because the soil is porous. On the right-hand side, this is an example of where the ground is not porous, and so they've got a grid up above. The water comes through the gravel, and it hits a fabric, and then you can't really see these arrows very well, but it does move off to the side where the water can be stored off to the side. So technically, when you're designing these, you have to look at the site. And so each part of the site can be different. Each part of the site can have different soils. So if you look at our 75-acre park, there's a lot of ground there, and there's going to have to be a lot of dirt moved because it slopes significantly. So a lot of dirt will have to be moved around, and soils analysis will have to be done. In that case, you're probably going to have different areas of the park that will succeed with the gravel parking lot and other areas that might not. So it's going to be done on a case-by-case basis. The temporary gravel road, on the other hand, beyond parking lots, is designed only for parks. And again, the reason we came up with this concept as staff is we didn't anticipate this being in our smaller parks in town. We're thinking of a way to save money on a large park that's going to take a long time to develop, many years, and this will help save funding for other needs the city would have. As you know, right now, you're trying to figure out ways to get a road to the park as well as develop the parks themselves. So having gravel roads within the site will help save money, and it'll allow a little bit of temporary flexibility where you can move a road if it's been put in gravel, whereas if you've put it in asphalt, you're pretty well secure of where you're going. So again, this is proposed only in parks. It'll follow the Federal Highway Administration standards for gravel roads. It's a temporary solution for road alignment. It addresses drainage without infrastructure needed for that. It'll lower the impact to the surface runoff, which is important. It gives you the ability to install it quickly, so staff can go out and install this. It can be performed by in-house staff at a low cost. And it can be paved in the future, if that's what you want. This is the design of the gravel road, and I would probably rely on our new Public Works Director to give us any detail on this. This again was put together by Mr. Munkin. But you can see on the left-hand side, this is gravel with fabric down below it, and this example shows soft soils. And so this was intended to illustrate how a gravel road could be put in on top of soft soils. The illustration off to the right, you look on the top and it shows the crown of the road. It's about a 2% slope on either side. So water will go not only through the road, but also drain off to the side and be caught in these side basins. This shows your buildup of your road and different techniques of putting the fabric underneath and making it drain off to the side. So these are solutions that we hope you will consider. We're not asking for a decision today. We're going to take this to the Planning Commission. We'd like to see essentially what you have to say today about this. If you give us the go-ahead, we'll review the code internally and come up with something to bring it back to Planning Commission and Council. Now, in your packet, I also included a small draft of code language that could be used. Mr. Munkin helped put some together, and I added some language as well. Fairly simple, so I haven't vetted it with anyone else, but certainly would welcome your feedback on that. And we're available here for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Mr. Cool, I'll turn to council at this point. Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, pretty excited to see this. Talking with staff yesterday, and you were in the room, it was discussed that, full build out is, potentially 20 years out. So, some value engineering and looking at other ways we can do this here, probably the only way we'd get phase one to be able to happen. You mentioned some of the site elevation issues out there, and it's a fairly, when you're looking at something as big as a few soccer fields, it's a pretty challenging site to build on. I would say from the northwest corner to the east side of the property, I would assume that there's 25 to 30 feet of elevation rise out there. I think it would be pretty enlightening for council to see that map at some point, and to maybe even do a site walkthrough after some cleanup is done out there. With the gravel parking lot, for instance, I've taken the kids all over the state to play baseball games. I'm trying to think of all the facilities where we've traveled to go to the state championships and stuff. Every one of them had a gravel parking lot. I haven't seen one with the plastic grid though, for instance. Is that needed, or can we just go with a regular gravel parking lot like the rest of them have? Seems like that would bring the cost down even more. And then with the gravel road, are we talking once a year that it would need graded, or, some of the maintenance issues that would go along with it. But obviously, I think this is the only way to make phase 2 happen in the near future, or phase 1, I mean. So, those are the couple questions there. Do we need the plastic gridding? And seeing some of those elevation points out there would be very interesting.
Thank you. Yes, we can get an elevation map for you to show you the various contour intervals, to show you where the height is and where it slopes downward. The grids are required for this type of road design, and it's designed to keep the gravel compact, and so it'll stay together. You can see from that picture we showed you, that's the picture of what it'll look like for a long time. These can last 10 years or more. Obviously, we might want to asphalt this later, and that's why I'm recommending in our code that we tie it to our capital improvements plan or our TIP if it's a road, so that every 6 years you look at it to make sure you might want to fund it in a future phase to asphalt the road and asphalt the parking lot. It's a much more durable surface, will last longer. You just mentioned that it would require some maintenance to the roads, which it could. So that's something worth considering. This is an interim measure, so you don't have to asphalt everything right away and to save you some money in the short run. In the long run, you might want to consider asphalting. And that's what we do in planning as well as engineering. We require asphalt, and we work with developers all the time to make sure that they put in asphalt because it's much more durable. And it's a standard that we live by. If you think of going out to Walmart or to Safeway or to the post office or any other place, you wouldn't expect to see gravel in those kinds of places. You expect to see asphalt. In this case, we're thinking of a large regional park where sure you could get by with a temporary gravel parking lot and gravel roads for quite some time until you decide to improve it.
And the only other thought I had there is, I've had some really good luck over the years using millings, using ground asphalt, and wonder if there's a point to where that might be able to work out there as well.
I'm not a road building expert, but maybe Steve knows a little something about ground asphalt. Cool.
Mayor, Councilmember Heisen has her hand raised.
Oh, Councillor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Cool. I love everything about this. It's economical, it's attractive, it's environmentally friendly. It allows us to change it later in the future if we want to. I wanted to say I really appreciate some of the creative solutions that have been coming out of the development services and public works and engineering departments lately. It's really heartening to see some out of the box solutions that are going to allow us to move forward in a way that works for everybody. So, and I would love if you plan on doing a site visit anytime soon, I would love to accompany you so I could go and take a look at the site, like Mr. Hoffmeyer suggested.
Definitely, we'll see if we can pull
So
that
thank
off.
you.
Great, good comments. Anyone else got any input or questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cool. Looks like you've got a couple more, or Development Services does. I guess I'd see on our next item, which is B, residential density standards. Looks like we have Ray
Lindenberg. Right?
Ray Lindenberg, who's with us on camera. Ray, are you with us?
I am indeed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm just here to give you a brief update on our residential dimensional standards review and to kind of solicit from you a direction to go, because we have a couple of different potential paths here that we can take now that we've done kind of all the background work and done some research and things like that. So what I'm going to do is bring up on my screen here and yours a brief presentation. And so let me get that started here real quick. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. That's just my title screen there. But just to go through, again, briefly, this presentation, we've already talked about some of these things. But essentially what we're looking at is a further process within our housing action plan that was adopted in 2021. And there are a number of recommended actions, and one of those recommended actions was to take a look at our density standards, which essentially boils down to minimum lot sizes and how many units per acre you get in residential zoning districts. So those were considered to be of a high priority, reducing the minimum lot sizes and those bulk and dimensional standards to allow greater density and hopefully lower some of those housing prices, and just to be able to fit more housing into the existing area. We have a limited amount of space that we have to work with within the urban growth area, so we need to be more efficient with the use of that. So that's one of the ways that we can look at doing it. So we took a look at dimensional standards from some of our peer cities. Those are cities of similar size in the state of Washington, just listed there. You got in your packet some of the standards that are in those peer cities with regards to their minimum lot sizes and dimensions. And we didn't necessarily base anything off of any particular city, but we did review and kind of compare and contrast what we have versus what other cities have. And we feel like what we have now is kind of outdated from the standpoint of the lots are probably too large and are directing developers in the direction of doing planned residential developments, which requires a lot more space, essentially. What happens there is when you have an infill development, those PRDs don't really work because they are required to have open space and amenities and things like that sometimes just don't pencil for a smaller development. So what we have is our current standards here on the gray slide, but you can see there we have our density standards in our R zones, and alongside that are the lot sizes that are required. And then you have your minimum lot width and depth and building coverage and the setbacks. And below that in the yellow beige color are some of the recent subdivisions that we've done. And you'll see that nearly all of them have lot sizes that are significantly less or less than what our requirements are, and that's because those are PRDs. And the PRDs, again, they work fine for larger projects like our Hillside project, but you notice that the one there that does have the minimum lot sizes that are larger than 7,200 square feet, the Wynn short plat, which was on Ely Street, does not, because it was not a PRD. And pretty much what happened there is the developer determined that a PRD just wouldn't work from the standpoint of having to provide open space and some of the amenities that are required by that PRD code. And so for one of these smaller infill lots, in practice, it just doesn't work as a PRD, so they had to go with the larger size lots, which kind of flies in the face of what we're trying to do with planning, and that's the density in appropriate areas. And those appropriate areas are, you know, the areas along major streets and thoroughfares, bus routes, close to shoppings and things like that. And so that kind of went in the wrong direction, and we want to avoid that in the future. So we have a couple different alternatives here. The first one is what I call the lot size concept. And what that would do is reduce the minimum lot sizes down to 4,000 square feet. And I picked 4,000 square feet just kind of as a practical matter, because the minimum lot width and depth that we changed also, or we're proposing to change, actually makes it so that there's a functional 3,200 square foot minimum lot size. If we want to put a bumper on that and require the lots be a little bit larger, we can do that. 5,000 square feet was kind of a typical lot size in the past, but I think based on our development that you saw on the previous pages, 4,000 square feet is not an unreasonable ask, and it always leaves open the possibility for developers to do larger lots. This is not saying that anybody has to do 4,000 square feet or these much smaller lots or anything like that. It opens up the possibilities to the market. If the market wants larger lots, then that's what we'll get. However, what we do is when you see the 4,000 square foot lot size, that goes haywire with our density requirements. And essentially what it does is it makes it so that we have to increase the density requirements in at least the R1 zone And also, if we're going to do that, it seems like a good time to increase the minimum density in R2 and R3 zone districts. So I included that on there as a possibility for some of the changes that we might look at if we decide to go with the minimum lot size concept. But going on to the next logical step, at least in my mind, is that we can take a look at doing what I call the density concept. And the density concept is something that other cities have used to guide their minimum lot sizes. They don't have a minimum lot size per se, but they do have minimum lot sizes in practice. And how they did that is they set the minimum maximum density for units per acre for their various different zone districts. And then they have their standard lot dimensional standards, 40-foot width, 80-foot depth, whatever it may be, to require that you have at least a 3,200 square foot lot again. But if you have a situation where you want to do 3,200 square foot lots and that fits and you get that density out of it, you still have the creativity and the ability to have some larger open space areas if you wanted to. We can do cottage type developments where there's houses situated around a green area or something along those lines. It opens up a wide range of possibility with regard to creative design and interesting different things that we can do that aren't just your typical tract neighborhood marching down the street with houses that all are kind of close together and look the same. And that is one of the dangers that we face when we do much narrower lot sizes. And that's something that we have tried to address via the design regulations and guidelines document and by the PRD code requirements. And so one of the things I wanted to address on there too is you'll notice in the setback section, that's for both of these alternatives, these concept alternatives, is a front setback that says 20 feet/10 feet. And what that is it goes to 20 feet to a garage to allow parking in a driveway, and 10 feet to living space. And living space can include a front porch or the actual home itself. But what that would allow for is the ability to have that living space and that house itself to be a little bit closer to the street to break up the visual impact of having monotonous garage doors as you go down a street in the city. And so that is a possibility as well, whether they be front porches or it's a living room or a bay window or what have you, or even a second floor projection that goes over a garage, something along those lines. And again, what we're trying to do is encourage creativity and encourage attractive buildings, but still have the ability to get a little bit greater density and lower those lot sizes down so that we can get a little bit more affordable housing and a little bit greater numbers in the same amount of space. And so our setbacks are pretty much changing in the front and changing on the side to allow for 5 feet on both sides, because if we're going to have narrower lots, we just have to have that. 5 feet on one side and 12 feet on the other seems to be kind of outdated from the standpoint of what other cities are requiring. Typically, the only reason you would need to have a 12-foot side yard setback is if you had a garage in the back or something along those lines to allow for a driveway. And if that's the case, then that's certainly available. Again, this is a minimum, not a standard. It doesn't have to be 5 feet. We're not changing height limitations, and the only other change you see there is the building coverage maximum. Again, if we're having smaller lots, we have to increase that a little bit, and so we would increase the maximum lot coverage to 45%, and that's just consistent with the other zone districts. And again, as we look through those peer cities, I feel like the standards that we have proposed here are pretty consistent with what those peer cities have. And again, it's important to note if anybody wants to do variations from these standards to either do smaller lots or to do zero lot lines or other kind of creative solutions, the PRD process still would remain. And so that would still be available to developers. So what we're looking at here, our next steps are to go through our public outreach, take care of our noticing. We've done some of that already, but get a draft ordinance presented to you. But essentially what our question as staff is here today is to kind of discuss these concepts and see what kind of guidance that the City Council has for staff as to which direction we want to go on this. Do we want to look at doing minimum lot sizes, or do we want to go with the density standard on that? So that's where I leave it to you for any discussion you might have with regards to those.
Okay, thank you, Ray. I'm going to turn to council at this time. I see Councilor Wiesner has got his hand up.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much for presenting that. As you know, and Mr. Oborn know, this has been my cry for about 4 years now. And I just want to share with everybody my perspective as to why this is important. We make this move, and the wind project was a perfect example. You know, we let some density get away from us, right? We let 3 or 4 more houses that could have been built in the community slip away, as well as those houses that were built in there all could have been built for a little less money with that density. But for that project, as Ray had stated, it didn't make sense. It didn't. The PRD stuff doesn't work for these smaller projects, both from the standpoint of having the available land for the park or the set aside, but also just the cost of going through a PRD and the time frame to go through a PRD when you're splitting it up amongst 4 or 5 lots, spreading that cost of that PRD and the engineering and the extra designing and the extra timeline, you know, just gets to be exuberant. So what I'd like to see is the no minimum lot size. Let the densities drive this. It's going to, I think it's going to benefit our community with having people come in with some really smart ideas. I know there's been some people poking around town looking at doing some small houses, some tiny homes, and of course this has been a holdback for them, and I think, quite frankly, I think they're planning on moving on to another community for the last I heard, but they've been poking around Oak Harbor. But what we need to do obviously is come up with an ordinance that gets us as close to that PRD ordinance to invoke infill building. This could bring some people off the fence who have infill properties in town that don't quite make sense to split up because they can only get 4 or 5 lots out of it. But now if they can get 8 or 9 lots out of that same property, that could make sense. So this could help with our property shortage. At the same time, we still got the PRD ordinance out there. We don't want to water down. We still want to have incentive for those larger developments to follow that ordinance and build our little pocket parks and our areas that are within that ordinance, and by keeping some setback requirements and maximum building coverage requirements, we keep that intact. For a larger development, it's going to make more sense for to go through that PRD process, reduce those setback requirements, expand the maximum coverage requirements, which would be allowed to do within the PRD, and then of course the city then still gets its pocket park. So from a logical standpoint, if we remove the minimum lot density, it should drive a little bit more of that infill development our direction, which is what we've been looking for, because we know that's probably one of the quickest ways for us to get more housing in our community. But at the same time, it's going to give the incentive for those larger developments to still follow the PRD process and create those public spaces. So that's my 2 cents. Remove all the lot size, let the density drive it, understanding that we've still got the protection with the maximum lot coverage and the setbacks that makes it so that if somebody's going to come in and do a big development, they're most likely going to go through that PRD process. Thanks again, Ray, for all the hard work on it. I know we've got a lot on your plate, and I know you're probably going to be presenting the next one too, but appreciate the time and effort on this one. I think it's going to make some pretty big strides towards some of that change into affordable housing that we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Good input, good comments. Councilor Stuckey?
I'm sure glad Councilor Wiesner's here, because this is definitely more up your alley than it is mine. But I was thinking the same thing about the density, kind of agreeing with you, but you articulated much better than I. My question that is not specific but related to this concept is, a month or 2 ago, there was an article in the paper about the tiny home village down the south end. Does this have any effect on the ability to do that or the ability not to do that? Are they related at all, or am I just not making any sense.
The thing is about it, in practice, tiny homes are permitted by our zoning code. However, if you want to build, say, a 400 square foot or 300 square foot house, you would have to build it on a 7,200 square foot lot, which makes 0 sense. So if you wanted to do that within the context of an R1 zone district, it doesn't make sense. R2, it still really doesn't make sense because it's 6,000 square feet. So what this would do is bring that down. If for instance, somebody wanted to build, and it depends on what we're considering to be a tiny house. Maybe we're talking about a house that's 600 square feet on a 3,200 square foot lot. Maybe that does make sense financially and economically for a developer. And maybe it's something that's attractive to, buyers in the community. I'm not certain with that, to tell you the truth. But if somebody wanted to go through a PRD process, they could do it either way. We don't have a minimum size for a house. We do have minimum sizes for lots, and that's where it's we run into the stumbling blocks, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, this is all incredibly exciting to see. When my campaign started, I guess roughly a year ago, this is something that came up again and again and again. And I just, thank you to Councillor Wiesner for letting me pick your brain on this as we went through this. A little over a decade ago, I built houses for several years. And the wind project, for instance, was just kind of just a microcosm of what has been going on. And yes, this helps with development, but the goal here is that it will help the average citizen as well. And Councillor Wiesner, thank you for all your work to get it to this point.
Okay. Seeing no others, I would also like to thank you, Ray, for, I know, a lot of hard work and thinking out of the box, comparing other cities. Thank you very much for
Mr. Mayor, if I
your
may
efforts.
ask a question quickly.
Sure.
I heard 2 people say that they would like to go with the density concept. Is that direction for staff, I guess, is the question at this point. I see thumbs up. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Looked like you got 4 thumbs right there. So, good. Oh, maybe 5. Thank you. Okay, with that, then we'll move on to our next item under Development Services, last one, which is C, Zoning Code Revisions. And I think we have Mr. Cool back with us, Development Service Director. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor, members of council. We're going to talk a little bit about another text amendment, just like the last one. This is a text amendment to make a adjustment in our code, and it's called housekeeping. So what housekeeping is, it's a technique we use when we want to batch a number of changes to the code together in one big ordinance. So rather than come to you with a large series of code changes that requires a lot more in-depth work, these are smaller changes all batched together called housekeeping. Thank you. So once again, this is called housekeeping, and it's a review and update of minor changes to the code to help clarify the code. It eliminates provisions that were missed in an update, also known as an oversight. It'll take care of any outdated code changes, and it'll match other areas of code so that they link up. Tonight we have 4 areas to change, and this is also scheduled for the Planning Commission for a hearing in May. The first section is fire sprinklers. It's section 8.05.050. And what this would do is it would require fire sprinklers to be required in duplexes and townhomes. And this is under section 13D of the fire code. This essentially would allow plastic piping for these sprinklers. And it's all because of a number of fires that have recently occurred in buildings. Our fire chief is here today, and he can certainly respond to any questions you might have on this topic. So, Ray, do you have any input on the request for this particular change?
Yes. And you want to hear what those are?
If so desired.
As Mr. Kula said, there has been an uptick recently in structure fires in townhomes and in duplexes. The fire code, as well as the Washington amendments to the fire code, excuse me, have allowed for sprinkling in townhomes. Our code has not allowed for that in the past because of the way our code has been written. We have seen changes in the design of townhomes, and to give you an idea of a townhome, we can have 4 single-family dwellings stuck together to create a townhome, but they are each an individual unit by themselves, a standalone unit. And there are specific building requirements for those buildings. But the overall square footage, if you took that building by itself, would require to be sprinkled. But because they are built as a townhome, they're not required the sprinkling system. Our code does allow for it. The Washington Amendment does allow for it. And as we've seen with our own jurisdiction, we've had an uptick in fires in townhomes recently. I think it's a good thing to do in order to put the sprinkling systems in the townhomes. The fire code does require sprinkling systems in all our occupancies with the exception of single-family dwellings. So the caveat was a townhome was considered a single-family dwelling, so they didn't have to sprinkle them. By changing this, we'll make the home safer, and it'll be for a better community environment for those folks to live in. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about sprinklings in town. I could go on for a long time, but I probably shouldn't.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thanks, Chief Mayor. I just want to make sure we're clear on this. We're talking wet PEX, right? Systems are going to be allowed to...
PEX?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
To give you an idea, there's 3 classifications of sprinkling systems. There's NFPA 13, there's NFPA 13R, which deals with residential, and there's 13D, which deals with single-family and duplex dwellings. And the D system is a flow-through system that runs off the domestic water supply to the building. So there's no additional meters, there's no additional piping that has to be installed from the main. It's just strictly a connection into the domestic water system, and water is constantly flowing through those sprinkler heads, not flowing out the bottom of the sprinkler head. Let me make that very clear, that it's through the sprinkler head itself. There's a 4-port inlet that water flows all the time. You flush a toilet and water will flow through that head.
Thanks. And you get why that's important, right? I mean, you and I both know the difference in costs between sprinkler systems. You're talking about a system that can be installed for roughly $400 to $500 versus a system that could cost thousands or tens of thousands.
That is correct. So using the PEX system, the 13D system, while it's under construction, one day a plumber can put the whole system in.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Councilor Stuckey.
Well, that was going to be my first question, is cost implications. You're talking about affordable housing, and, I appreciate that. Just to make sure, this would be on new developments, not retroactive to places that are already in place, correct?
That's correct. It would be on new developments, and if something were to be torn down more than 50%, then you'd theoretically bring it up to code. Is that your interpretation?
That is correct.
All right, very good.
And just for someone like me who's not a firefighter, how important are these? Like, do they make a big impact, in your opinion, as far as firefighting goes?
Yes.
Good
And I
enough.
could spend an hour talking about that, but the bottom line is yes.
Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Very happy to see that you'll be allowing the D, like Councilor Wiesner said, $500, $600, $700 a house versus, $16,000 to $20,000. I mean, huge. Some of the codes, with sprinklers is, if a fire hydrant's within 150 feet, it's not required. Will this be required in all instances here?
That is correct.
Okay, awesome. I think that's all I have on it. Thank you.
Councilor Evans.
Hey, Chief. I think we talked about this previously, but those sprinkler systems also affect our response time rating, correct? The more buildings we have sprinklered, the better
That is correct.
for our response time?
It doesn't make a difference in the response time in this case, as we've talked. What it makes a difference is the fire is extinguished or held in check, allowing us to get there in a timely manner. So yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we've discussed that before.
Yep.
Okay, good questions. Seeing no others, then at this point, we'll move on back to
Oh, I have more?
Mr. Cool. Yes.
Thanks, Chief. Next topic is the existing buildings code. And the existing building code is a section within our zoning ordinance. So it's not really building code, but it's called existing buildings code in our zoning ordinance. Section 805020. What we'd like to do is match the non-conforming code with the existing building code. So what that really does is anytime you have an alteration or restoration of a building that's at 50% of the value of the current replacement value, that triggers the requirement to bring it up to code when you're reinstalling. So let's say a building suffers from an earthquake and is torn all the way down to the foundation. Well, then you have to meet current requirements. In this case, 50% is in our current code that talks about nonconformities. And we want to match that up. So the current existing buildings code talks about 60% of the replacement value. So we'd like to match all those up at 50%, which is a standard thing we've seen. I've seen it all around the country, and that's fairly uniform, 50% rather than 60. We'd also like to change the language. Instead of current replacement value, our building official, Ginger Pennington, recommends appraised value. So those are the two changes we'd like to propose in our zoning ordinance relating to the nonconformities and the restoration of buildings.
Councillor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for that, Mr. Cool. I got to tell you, I actually have a problem with that change of current replacement value to appraised value. Picture the scenario, right? We've got a house that's, run down, but, still very rebuildable, right? But in its rundown condition, current condition, it's worth $100,000. Well, you can spend $50,000 to bring that back to life at all. And when it's done, it's a $250,000 home, right? So, but if you can't spend $50,000 to bring it back, you got to tear it down and start over. And I think it's kind of that direction of going again to that non-affordability side of things. I realize why we do this, right? We do this so people aren't coming in and saying, hey, it's not new construction, it's a remodel, and they leave, one corner post standing, and then, of course, they get to build on a non-conforming lot, maybe a non-conforming structure with maybe even non-conforming water and septic connections and all sorts of stuff because it's a remodel, not new construction. But by doing that at the appraised value of the current structure and its current condition, I think you're going to find you're going to exclude a lot of homes from being rebuilt. And what you're going to end up doing is you're going to create people just doing it without permits, right? Because when they come in to find out, I can only spend $50,000 in remodeling this house, they're probably going to do it anyhow, and they're going to just circumnavigate the rule. I think this is a door closer, right? It's not a way to getting to yes, where if we're doing it at current replacement costs, we have an opportunity to save a structure, possibly create one more housing unit that's affordable rather than tearing it down and starting it from scratch, which is basically going to, end up driving honest people to be dishonest because we've kind of created a law that we can't follow. Thank you.
So, I'm a little confused too. I'm not sure what replacement value really is. Can you help me? Is my home today, because it has a county assessed value, I've not paid an appraiser to give me a value, is that the replacement value? I don't know. I don't. So it's and maybe I'm putting you on the spot here. I think Mr. Wiesner's got an excellent subject to talk about. When you start putting a value, and I believe you have a member of your family who's in the real estate business, probably understands it's maybe better than you and I. I don't know what replacement value really is.
That's a good point. Replacement value versus appraised value, it could mean lots of different things. So what I should do is go back to the table and see if we can figure out exactly what that means and come back to you with some language that's more clear and can help somebody to save a house if that's what it sounds like you'd like to do.
Yeah, turn back to Mr. Wiesner. You might.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example of a house I own in the county that in its current state is appraised at roughly $90,000, and so I can spend $45,000 to bring this 3,000 square foot waterfront home back up to code. Now, to replace that home, it's probably a $500,000 replacement, right? And I would love to spend $250,000 on that home restoring it, right? But if I'm stuck to current appraised value in its current state, I can spend $45,000 to restore that home, and if it's going to take more than that, then technically, in this particular case, I would have to tear that house down and pick it up and move it back because you can't build houses on the beach anymore. You'd have to build it up on the hillside. So, I mean, now, there's a huge, the current replacement value is going to be what it takes to replace that 3,000 square foot home with a new home. And to think that somebody should be allowed to spend half the cost to restore a home and bring it back to that $500,000 or whatever value it is probably makes a lot more sense than basing it upon its current condition and half of its current value, which is the way I'm reading the requested word changing. So,
Other council input or questions? It sounds like you're thinking you might want to go back to the drawing board a little bit.
Fair
on
enough.
that.
We'll come back next time with something that's revised that
Okay.
makes more sense.
Okay. Is that good? Okay.
Cool.
Thank you for that one. We'll move on to the next, which is permitted principal uses in industrial zoning.
Yes, thank you. This is a section of code 1920-730. The zoning matrix, as you might remember, came through here about 3 or 4 months ago, maybe it was longer. The matrix combined all the different zoning criteria together into one nice chart, so it made it easier to understand. Unfortunately, there was a section of industrial code that did not get deleted as part of that, and so what this would do is just simply delete that unneeded language that is redundant, that we don't need. So this is basically a cleanup item that we need to do. Questions on that? No questions.
Not seeing any questions on that one. Okay.
Next item is accessory dwelling units. This is the last one today, section 19.42.050. Accessory dwelling units currently require an owner to live on the property. And we know you went through a very long, detailed work on accessory dwelling units a few years ago. It was actually liberalized a lot and made very flexible, so a lot of good work was done there. But for some reason, the requirement to have someone live on the site was kept. And that could have came out of an old concept that people were worried that people living in the accessory dwelling unit would somehow be better monitored if an owner lived on the property. I can understand where that comes from old thinking. However, as you just saw today, Ray's coming back to you by densifying neighborhoods. We're talking about eliminating lot sizes, putting in density everywhere, adding dwelling units on lots that maybe have a house on one side of the lot and room on the other side where you can put a second house on there. All we're talking about doing here is having an accessory dwelling, which is generally smaller than the main dwelling. So the impacts on the neighborhood are going to be significantly less than even 1 second full dwelling. What we're thinking is this language for an owner to be on the property is unneeded. We're not in the business in the planning department or even as a city regulating who lives on a piece of property. The only agency I'm familiar with that does that is the Housing Authority, who's regulating who's living in a property, are they qualified to live there, are they meeting their income thresholds, what is the criteria that they're following. So we're not interested really in regulating who lives there. So that's our proposal for you, is to take that language and the requirement for a covenant to be established on the property, regulating that an owner must live on the property. So questions you might have?
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mr. Cool, and thanks for that. You know, as you know, this was actually something that the council attempted to address a year ago, and we thought we had removed this covenant a year ago, and in fact, we had voted for it and moved it forward, but apparently the change didn't take place in a certain part of the ordinance. So as you say, housekeeping issue, and I think it's important for us all to remember the reason we did this, right? Because it basically, again, you know, made people who were trying to follow an ordinance that was hard to enforce and hard to interpret. It basically made innocent people try to circumnavigate the rule. And you know, how are we going to enforce it? At the same time, you know, by removing this, it allows people, you know, I guess the example I used, who's going to spend $50,000, $100,000 creating an ADU, not knowing what the future brings for them? In other words, that they'd have to spend that kind of money to build that ADU out, and then if something changed in their life that they had to move out of the house, they'd be ripping that ADU out of the house or off of the property because of this ordinance. So just one of those ordinances that didn't make sense back then, doesn't make sense today, and so I appreciate you guys. I know we had an issue with a property owner actually applying, and we thought that this had been removed from the ordinance, and it hadn't, so I appreciate you guys moving this up to the stack and getting it done for us. Thank you.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Yeah, I thought that had already been removed, so that was certainly the intent when we went over it earlier. So thank you, good catch, and we'll get this taken care of. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Heisen. Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, just echoing what's already been said here. You know, this is the ability to build auxiliary dwellings on property is something that comes up quite a bit in the community. Before I bought my house in 2011, it was one of the first things that I had called the city and asked was one could be built there. Pretty strange to think that, you know, so I could build one there, you know, could have my sister live in it, for instance. Circumstances change over the years and you decide you want to rent the house out. The thought that you would have to tear down that auxiliary dwelling is pretty baffling, you know, especially when you see so many people struggling to find affordable housing. And definitely excited to vote along the lines of getting this out of there.
Thank you, Councilor Hoffmeyer. Okay, seeing no other comments or questions? So does that conclude your
Yes, it
presentation?
does. Thank you very much.
Councilor Stuckey.
If I could just ask one more question based on, it's kind of going back a little bit as far as fire sprinklers. In the houses that have to have fire sprinklers, the townhomes and stuff, are they able to turn their water off if they were to be out of town for some time, or does that water have to remain on because there's a sprinkler system that's dependent upon it?
That water stays on, and there's also, and this comes up from years ago, there was a discussion many years ago about houses with sprinkling systems in them for non-compliance, for non-payment. Could the city shut the water off? And the answer is no. So the water does have to remain on, even if somebody does not pay their bill, because that is a fire protection feature that is required.
Great question. That was a
Mr.
great
Mayor,
question.
I have one question of the fire chief.
Yes.
Question came up last night at the Planning Commission. I didn't have the answer for it. Typically in industrial and commercial projects, they have operational permits, or they do an inspection of all those routinely. Is there an inspection annually or even any time for these home systems?
Yes and no. There is an inspection when the system is built. They have to meet a certain design standard and design feature, and then we do what we call the bucket test. This is an old test. You put a 35-gallon garbage can in the middle of the room You put a 5-gallon container in that and you flow water into the 5-gallon container and you see how long it takes it to fill it up to see if it meets the minimum requirement for water flow. And that's how we test that sprinkling system. Once that is signed off, we're done with the system. So there's no other operational requirements after that.
Okay, thank you.
The bucket system, okay. That's a learning. I learned something new here today, as I do most every day. Thank you, Chief. You're welcome. And
Thank you. We'll be back to the Planning Commission with the hearing as well as this body fairly soon. So, thank you.
great, thank you, Mr. Cool. We will now move on to our next section in the agenda, which is Marina. And we have a Marina dredging update. And for this, I know we have our Harbor Master, Chris Sublett. And it looks like we also potentially have our project manager, Brett Arvidsson. And I understand Mr. Sublett might have our Marina Advisory chair with us today. So I'll first turn it to Chris Sublett.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, council members. Yes, we do have the Marine Advisory Committee Chairman Ken Hewlett with us as well. So I'm going to give you a presentation today on dredging. This is the same presentation that I gave back in October, but I think that because we have newer council members, it would be prudent to go through it again as we're preparing to get pretty active on this project. So where I dig too far into it, just to clarify, we're only talking about dredging the marina and not the channel or the bay. This is everything from the breakwater in towards the shore. We do need to dredge every 10 to 15 years, and our last dredge effort was in 2010, 2011, and we only dredged about half of the marina. We removed approximately 20,000 cubic yards of material, and the cost was about $2.7 million. But part of that cost was for some other things in the project, such as some new floats, gangway, and some electrical upgrades. Previous to that, the last dredging effort was in 1996 and 1997. And at that time, they removed about 39,000 cubic yards of material. So if you look at those numbers, you can see 20,000, we did about half of it last time. So a lot of the marina is in desperate need of dredging. So what have we done to kind of move forward on this? Just recently, we refinanced our dredge bond, and that allowed us to refinance about $1.5 million, and we refinanced it to a 5-year bond. We actually owed about 10 more years on it, and we cut that in half. We have briefly discussed this at the July 28th City Council workshop. On September 13th, the Marine Advisory Committee made a formal recommendation to move forward with dredging. And then again, at October 27th, I gave this same workshop gave the same presentation at the workshop. As part of this project, we'd like to include removing the old sawdust breakwater barges that are currently sunk on the south side of the marina. This is part of our DNR contract, and we estimate about $116,000 for that part of it as well. So that'll be nice to get that done. So why do we have to dredge? Some of you have seen this map before. All of these numbers should be at 12 or 15. This was taken, we did a survey with our boat in last July, and you can see that there's some 5s and 6s and 7s and 8s and 9s. And some people might think that that's plenty of water, but as boats become more modern and bigger, they draw more water. So at a zero tide, when you only have 6 or 5 or even 7 feet under you, a lot of boats can't pass through that because they just draw that much water, particularly sailboats. So as we move forward with this dredge project, there are a lot of steps in it. And within each step, there's many sub-steps. So as we move forward with this now, we have to realize that it could actually be 2 to 3 years before we actually start dredging. The permitting process in this is pretty lengthy and pretty detailed. Should also be noted that it's likely there will be a significant expensive mitigation required on this as well. As an example, in our last dredge project, we had to rebuild the beach in front of the harbor master's office in the parking lot. And we also donated about $50,000 to Coronet Bay and helped them build up their beach. Moving forward, we know that these mitigation requirements have gotten much more significant and much more expensive. So where are we at in the project? We made the formal presentation and got a recommendation again from the Marine Advisory Committee. I made this presentation October 27th, and I'm presenting it again today. Moving forward, we're going to create a request for a proposal for the project engineering and preliminary engineering. And we did receive a ballpark cost from Moffett Nickel that part of the process is going to be around $300,000. Once that time frame ends, then we'll select the most qualified and experienced engineering firm, and we'll come back to you and seek formal council approval to award that contract. Behind the scenes, we're desperately seeking out financing for the dredge project, looking for grants. We're hoping to get $150,000 in ARPA funds, and we're strategizing with our finance director. The challenge here is that we're competing with port districts, and most of the grants out there are for port districts, not for city-owned marinas. Just a reminder, we are an enterprise fund. This means that we're self-supported by the marina tenants, with the real workhorse in our finances coming from moorage, sheds, and fuel. We do not receive any taxpayer funds, but interestingly, the marina is viewed like a park and used by many non-marina tenants. We have about 5,100 feet of total dock space. About half of that is open to the public. The reality is that 100% of it is open to the public because anyone can come get a guest card anytime they want to walk the docks. We do provide a lot of economic benefits to the city. In 2021, we welcomed approximately 700 unique guest boats. Most of them stayed multiple nights, and rarely do people cruise alone. They typically had 2 or 3 people on board. And then, of course, a lot of them love to go downtown and shop and hit the restaurants and bars. As you can see this picture in here, this is a sign that's been there since the marina was open. Well, not this specific sign, but the wording on this sign. And I've circled where it says a marine park for use by the general public. That's something that people hold true to and that the marina holds true, that we are open to the general public. So how are we going to fund this? Again, we recently refinanced the dredge bond, and that actually saved us $194,000. And we shortened the time that we have to pay it back. It should be noted that we are the enterprise fund, but this model is no longer sustainable for these type of capital projects. And again, we're competing with port districts that receive taxpayer funds, and there's just tons of grants and national funding out there for taxpayer funds. It's likely we're going to have to secure a new bond, and it's also likely that we're going to have to use some of the marina reserves. Currently, we have about $1.3 million in reserves, and recently we applied for the $2 million appropriation, but we did not get it. So with that, I know that Ken might have a few words to share with you, and then we'll jump into questions. So go ahead, Ken.
Thanks, Chris. And I think you covered things well. And of course, in the previous meetings, a lot of this was covered. Dredging is vital to the function of the marina. It's not something that we can put off or kick the can down the road on or anything, because as Chris said, it's absolutely necessary for boats to have enough water under them so they can move about the marina, even if they don't leave for any length of time. And it also has a negative impact on boats visiting our marina. Often, you know, a larger boat will call in looking for marina space, and we'll have to turn them around and tell them, sorry, but we can't accommodate you, either for we don't have the space at a dock or we don't have the depth that they require. So rather than, you know, beat a dead horse here. I would be open to questions as well as Chris.
Okay. Any other words there, Chris? Or we'll just turn to council at this time. I guess I have one question. I'm not sure whether you were our harbor master when we had a state representative that tried to change the law in Olympia, and I know that because I remember that, and that was what, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe. Are you familiar with that? You know, we might also think about reintroducing that possibility, so we could be treated more like ports.
Yes, you're exactly right. That was about 6 or 8 years ago, and we made a big push on that. We went down to Olympia. It was myself, Mr. Powers, and Mr. Omberg, and we gave a presentation. And our goal at that presentation was to get all city marinas, that's us in Des Moines, two of us, Des Moines joined us, treated as port districts in a lot of different ways, mainly for DNR leases, but it also had some of these aspects as well to it. Unfortunately, that wasn't approved and that didn't move forward. And I know that was about the third or fourth attempt. I know Harbor Master Dave Williams made several attempts at that as well in the late 80s and 90s and failed each time as well.
Okay.
But it is worth a try again.
Okay. Just
Actually, the important thing to remember here is that the Department of Natural Resources, the Washington State Department of Natural Resources, actually owns all the shorelines area, or they claim to own all the shoreline areas abutting and underneath the marina area. And so we pay lease and leasehold taxes to the Department of Natural Resources on an annual basis. I don't recall how often we pay it, but it amounts to a significant amount of money. We have been able to negotiate in the past, as the mayor recalls, we did get a deferral for a couple of years, provided that we've made some required improvements and so on and so forth, because there's usually a quid pro quo to all those kinds of things, but it did assist us in terms of cash flow. And as Chris was talking about the enterprise fund, you know, it really, the model is that, you know, we pay our own way, and we've been successfully doing that since the 1970s. But as Chris mentioned, that model really doesn't address capital projects and the kinds of major things that we need to do down the road, such as maybe reconfigure the slips so that they're more attractive to more boaters, and, you know, lots of other things. But dredging is the thing that's on the table right now, and we know that without significant dredging, we just can't operate.
It's true.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'll turn to council. Councilor Hoffmeyer.
The marina is obviously a really, really important part of Oak Harbor. I think all of us up here support the marina. You know, I think, you know, we've heard that, you know, we've heard if it was a port district, for instance, it would get all these better treatments. The question I ask, and I hope we're looking at everything here, is our role in the marina holding it back right now? Would it be a good time to look at some type of public-private partnership, for instance? You know, I hope that we're looking at everything here, because the cost is going to be, you know, fairly insurmountable with regards to it being an enterprise fund. The other thing there, I think, I see the direction of the presentation with regards to it not being tax supported, you know, not being taxpayer supported, but in a way, you know, if we are to receive a grant, or, you know, even the recommendation of ARPA funding towards the feasibility study. I mean, those are tax dollars, and at the end of the day, it is one pot of money where that comes from. when it gets to mitigation, you mentioned last time how we had done some work out at Cornet Bay. I really hope, looking at the Windjammer study that we went out to the public for, I think the third most popular item on there was, beach enhancements. So, hopefully some of that mitigation can be done along Flintstone or at Windjammer, and, maybe, gosh, maybe there's some way that long talked about visitor dock ends up falling in closer to Flintstone. Obviously, I don't think we're ever going to move the whole marina, but maybe there is a way to work a visitor dock into it as well. And Chris, thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoffmeyer. Councillor Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor. And I would like to think there is maybe a way somewhere down the line to bring the marina into downtown. I think it's a big picture idea, right? And I think it requires something other than enterprise funds, right? The biggest problem we have with an enterprise fund is our bonding capacity, right? We don't have near the bonding capacity we could do if we had a tax base, long-term tax base, such as a port district that we could draw off of. So that's where it becomes very complicated for these larger projects. If we do bond it, we're not going to get the best rate, number one, because it's not a tax-driven bond. But I guess my question, Chris, is what does it take these days to form a port district? Is there even an option out there to consider that, to put that concept before the people to see what they think?
Sure. So just a little history on that. The Harbor Master Williams did lead an effort. I think that Mr. Hewlett was part of that to make the Oak Harbor Marina part of a Oak Harbor Port District. And it was long before my time, maybe 20 years ago or so. And that was not successful at all. It overwhelmingly lost. If you fast forward to maybe about 8 years ago or so, I talked to the Washington State Port Commission and learned that there has not been a successful port district attempt in I want to say like 40 years or something like that now. It's been quite a while. But the process for doing that is exactly what you said. You put it on a ballot and then the people vote for it. Typically port districts are school district boundaries is how most of them are these days. And the marina would be a small part of that port district. It would be far more encompassing and could have some advantages for other parts of the city as well. So it is a challenge and it is a voter process, and we would get the Port Commission heavily involved in it.
Well, I think, let's face it, the formation of a port district is another set of taxes, right? And so, no surprise, exactly. Right, of the pushback there. But I guess my thought process on that as a taxpayer is if you're going to come to me and ask for additional taxes to continue doing what we're doing, right, that's a pretty hard sell versus some additional taxes for something that is going to be an enhancement, something that is going to create something, right? And so I guess it goes back to my comments at both our retreat as well as what I've been, I guess, saying around town here a little bit, that if there was a bigger picture, right, that there was a end goal in mind that was going to be a true enhancement to the entire community, where everybody from the community looked at that and said, wow, that would really make a change to our community and really benefit the vast majority of the people living in it, that we'd probably have a little bit better chance at that. Right? I mean, we've got that challenge faced ahead of us, obviously, with the fire department, right? If we go out to the public, and educating them that there is going to be a benefit at the end of this, right? Their insurance rates are going to stay lower. Their lives may be saved through response times, right? And I don't know that the last time we attempted that port, and I don't know that a lot of ports or attempts at ports, I don't know what that history is, but certainly it seems to me like the last time we went out and looked at it. We were just looking at supporting what we already had. And again, that's just a little bit of a hard sell. So, I guess I'm just going to keep speaking it. I guess I'm going to keep putting it out there. The idea that at some point in time, that marina connecting to our downtown core would be a game changer. It'd be a game changer for the marina. It'd be a game changer for our community. It'd be a game changer for our downtown and those businesses down there. And it would, put Oak Harbor on the map as a true boaters community rather than a place to stop and get fuel and head on out to one of the communities that you could, walk from the marina into town. So just going to keep putting it out there. We'll see if it gains some traction. But it's a big picture vision for sure, and it's not going to happen overnight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Councilor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Sublett, I understand that the marina was dredged back in 2010, and just looking at these depths on the map, which parts of the marina were dredged in 2010, if you can quickly sum that up?
So the parts of the marina that were dredged, I can show you on this map quickly. So the parts of the marina that were dredged were along this outer area here where you see the 5, the 8, the 9, the 8. It was dredged where the 7 is. It was dredged where the 10 is, the 8, the 6, the 8, the 8, and down here at the fuel dock, and right here where this 6 is, basically.
Okay. Thank you. That helps me a lot. Because the thing that keeps going through my head is if we're having to continue to dredge the marina while we're still paying for the previous dredge, that's a struggle for me. And we've got a lot of challenges going on in our community as we sit. We've got a new sewer plant that's not working at the full capacity due to our leaking sewer pipes. Our city staff are working in old city buildings with dirty ducts, and that needs to be addressed. Our hospital might not make it, and just like what's a community without a hospital? Well, what's a waterfront community without a marina? So I do agree that we need to figure out how to get it going, but right now the marina just seems like it's in a constant state of repair. And then we have our housing issue. The one thing I do want to say is, Mr. Sublett and Mr. Hewlett, I greatly appreciate your guys' work on this, and Mr. Hewlett, your work throughout the community and all your volunteer efforts. But I think that it's time that we start looking at people that have done this, people that have worked on the marinas, people that have rehabbed marinas, people that have turned these into a profit center. Anacortes has a very successful marina system, and they do not own them. They are private. And I think that, I don't know what the answer is, but I would encourage everybody involved to start thinking outside the box about what options there are that we can make that marina a profit center. Because going to a port district, as Mr. Wiesner said, that is a tax on the people. And yes, the marina is open to the general public, but not everybody in the general public uses it, and not everybody in the general public looks at it as something that they'd want to spend their tax dollars on. So I do think we're going to have to get creative, but I think now is the time to start looking at what options there are, going down Councilor Hoffmeyer's comment of a public-private partnership. I think we have to start looking at what options there are, and that public-private partnership just might bring it to the downtown. So those are my thoughts, and I do want you guys to know that I definitely appreciate the work that you guys are doing.
Just wanted to make an additional comment. We agree, we meaning the Marine Advisory Committee, agree that there are two very different time frames and scenarios that we're looking at. The dredging work that we're talking about is near term, relatively inexpensive, and it's going to cost a lot of money, but relatively inexpensive and so forth, as opposed to forming a port district and accumulating the funds and so forth to make substantial improvements or redevelopment, or to actually move the site itself. So we're talking about two different things. We're trying to maintain what we have at a reasonable cost, and at the same time, we are open to looking at these various other options. And as Chris mentioned, the previous attempt to form a port district, that was actually in the early 1990s. And it was about the time the base closure thing hit the fan, and we were scrambling for things to do. And it did fail. It was a ballot measure, and the way that it has to go together, you have not only the port district itself, and you establish the boundaries and so on and so forth, but you also have candidates running for the port commission seats at the same time. So it's kind of a complicated issue. It's not impossible, and something that we have addressed from time to time. But based on the lack of success with school levies and other things, we've taken the tack now that our first and foremost effort is to fix the viability that we currently enjoy.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, Mayor, can I say one more comment here? Just things go back and forth. Interesting enough, if you look up the city of Sequim and the Port District of Port Angeles is talking about pulling a port out of it, and they use us as an example of a port coming out of a port authority and going into a city. So things go both ways, and there's certainly options both ways, but just kind of to give you a little other spin of the story here.
So they're obviously not looking at all the details.
To them, it looks better on going the city side. They haven't done it, but it was interesting. They used Oak Harbor as an example of pulling a port out of a port authority and having it be a city port. So, yeah.
I'm very familiar actually with the Port of Port Angeles, and they have hundreds of acres of port property there. So they're talking about a very different scale of project than what we're having to deal with now. And I can imagine them using this as an example, but it's not a very good example, if you're trying to compare apples and apples.
I happen to know Mr. Hewlett comes from that area originally, and so that's nice to get that input. But it's also an important point that he makes in that we're talking about two different things here. There is no question that marina, where it's at today, is going to need to be dredged very soon, and we're going to have to, certainly be thinking about options and ways to do that. So, thank you very much, and put your thinking caps on. The idea of partnerships or other ways. Let's think about everything. So, seeing no other questions. Thank you both, Mr. Sublett and Mr. Hewlett, for that information. Let's move on then to our next item, which is under engineering. And it looks like we've got an A and a B. The first is our GIS update. And I believe we have our Public Works Director, Mr. Steve Schuler. And it looks like maybe our city engineer, Alex Werner. Is Alex, yes, I see Alex on, nice to see you. And is Alex then taking the lead on this?
That's right, Mayor.
Perfect.
And I also have our engineering technician, John Pollock, available to present with me on the next two topics.
I see Mr. Pollock there. I recognize the hat. Welcome, both.
Yes. So, thank you, Mayor and council members. This one is really exciting for me to present. It's been years in the making, and we're ready for it to go live. So this is our GIS, which is Geographic Information System. And we're utilizing this as a citywide mapping and online access for the public. We go to the next slide. There we go. So what is GIS? So a Geographic Information System, or GIS, is a system that creates, manages, analyzes, and maps all types of data. So you can see the image here showing what we have in the real world, and then we separate that out into what we call layers in GIS, and that can be anything from zoning to sewer lines, to elevations, addresses. So the GIS connects the data to the map, and it shows you that location data in real time. So the history here, for several years, Engineering Division, Public Works has been developing the maps for various city services. The effort's been led by Craig Taylor, our senior engineering technician. And prior to 2021, a lot of this was only available based on our paper records and then some limited Google Earth overlays we've been using internally. And of course, mapping is always kind of put to the side when we've got more pressing issues of getting some development reviews done or capital projects out the door. So with some added resources, we've had the ability to put more time into this mapping. So the reliance on the paper maps has kept the continuing conditions changing more difficult to communicate. So the goals with our GIS system, and again, this was supported by council, and I got to thank council and the mayor for allowing us to add 2 additional engineering technicians in Public Works. So around September of this last year, we added Philip Cascadia, and he was a new hire, and then Jonathan Pollock came over from our water division as another engineering technician. So with this additional staffing and the goal of integrating all mapping that have been collected over the years came into focus, and it's actually attainable. The additional goal of publishing this valuable information to an online, accessible, and secure service was set. We had an internal goal of making this available by March 1st of this year, and we actually beat that goal. That was a goal to make it available to development services. It's kind of a in-house trial run. We made that available February 18th, and we've been utilizing that since then. So with that, I'm going to turn over to John to go over more of the details of our GIS system.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Council. One of the main projects that I've had over the past several months was to translate our GIS information into our ArcGIS online service. And that includes our layers that will cover the zones, aircraft incident potential risk areas, the aircraft noise levels, risk of encountering our cultural resources and archaeological objects. Of course, the basic parcel information, but also including flood zones, critical areas, and our storm drainage basins. With that, we do have this hyperlink right here. It's kind of a long, drawn-out one. We would like to shorten that up with just a little click button. But for the moment, what this does is this will take you to this application, which is online, and you can access live from your own terminals, even your smartphones. And what this would present to you currently is configured to show up is our current zoning as per the Development Services Department's information. We also have the joint planning area and the urban growth areas displayed on this as the default set alone. You have additional information that's available to you up here in this layer list, which is this icon right here. It looks like a stack of square pancakes. You can choose to add or remove items from this map as you see fit. So, for instance, if we wanted to turn off the urban growth and joint planning area and also our zones, you would still be left with the city limits highlighted out here for you. And then you could have a better look at other areas, like which ones in the city have archaeological risk factors associated with them, and you can turn them on and they're all color-coded with the various items. So that was a key piece of information that would be useful to a developer or someone that just wanted to, say, build a house on a single lot. For instance, they would need to do some groundwork, and there's a probability there of them encountering it. So again, you could turn those off as you see fit to clear your map up. Noise levels, I have both the maximum and the year-round average available for development services. So there are sound ordinances or sound code requirements for the building department that need to be met. So these are all color-coded and graphed out as well. There is a legend button here that will explain what is being displayed on the side. And if anyone has any difficulty with it, they can click this information button here, and there is a help document as well as our disclaimers and our terms of use that our legal department had reviewed and approved for us to deploy with this. The help document will open up a PDF, and it explains all the various buttons in greater detail. Every time the application loads, there will be a splash screen that pops up requiring the users to acknowledge that prompt. It will direct them that there is a terms of use and disclaimer that covers the information that we are presenting and sharing. And of course, with your permission, we would like to coordinate linking this application to our city website. Benefits of sharing this information publicly on the city's website would make it available to the general public, of course, but also other local agencies, our developers, other local engineering firms. It would help promote our development process by providing information that is routinely requested, but now it can be accessed by anyone, anywhere. So we also have some future uses in mind for this. As you are well aware, there is a land management software program from the Davenport Group that Development Services has been leading the way on implementing. That's their permitting and development review software suite. We've actually been interfacing with the Davenport Group behind the scenes there, ensuring that the GIS information that we have is shared and implemented with them. Some other uses could be with the fire department. I am already working to incorporate the fire hydrant inventory and the maintenance records with that so that they can go out in the field to perform their annual checks on the fire hydrants throughout the city so that they can call that up and they can see the most recent data for it. There are some applications available with the police department. They can provide historical incident information if they're desired. I understand that one of the officers has an idea for a small works type of work order tracking system internal to the PD, and so that information would be useful for them. And of course, here in Public Works, all of the infrastructure throughout the city, mapping current water and sewer utility services. A topic that's near and dear to me is the lead and copper rule in my former role as the water quality specialist. The upcoming revisions to that will require us to make publicly accessible all of our mapping information for the water services and the water meters throughout the city. So that will be one of those regulatory compliance items that we would need to do. We can also potentially map our street repair projects, such as our transportation benefit district overlays and other major capital improvement items that, as we go through paving the arterials and other streets throughout the city. So we could probably map those and provide it there as a public information and outreach and education opportunity. And there does exist some potential with some additional investment of being able to provide near real-time information if we encounter severe weather events, such as if we're out snow plowing or if we have to close roads for an extended period of time due to snow events or other storms. It could greatly benefit the public to have a resource like this available to them. So it is with our sincere thanks to the council for funding the additional engineering technician positions. Without the staffing support, getting our program to this point would not have been possible. I personally want to thank Craig Taylor and our construction inspector, Jack Smith, for carefully gathering and managing all of our historical mapping data for these many years. Without access to that, I couldn't have taken the lead and gotten this to you at this point in time. This really has been a team effort across multiple levels here in engineering, and so I want to acknowledge my coworkers with that. And thank you also to Island County, the United States Navy, and our partners with the Association of Washington Cities and Flow Analytics for the additional data and support that we've had with this project. And at this point in time, turn it back over to my boss. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John. Back to Alex. Any other comments about this at this time?
Well, this was really a informational presentation for council. Of course, we can take questions. I think the only other thing I'd ask is, do we need to make any sort of formal action at a future date, or is this something we can just put a link on the webpage to make available to the public? So that's my question to you, and we can take any questions you have. Thanks.
Okay, we'll turn to council at this time for questions. Councillor Evans?
I would like to finally say that this is exciting. You guys have answered a couple things. I asked a couple months ago about sewer and water mapping. That is exciting. I look forward to seeing that. Answered a couple questions that we just saw in our email this last week, street overlays and street repairs, having that accessibility to the public. I think this is a huge step in the right direction for some transparent communication with the public if we can get the word out about it. So thank you, all that were involved.
Any other input from council? Councillor Hoffmeyer?
Just echoing what Councillor Evans said, this is incredibly exciting. And Alex, Jonathan, thank you for all your hard work. I know there was a lot of other people in the department as well. And gosh, you guys almost deserve a heroes parade for this one. And there does happen to be a parade on Saturday. And I think several of us would be glad if you tagged along. But anyway, thank you very much. And if nothing else, come downtown and take your shot at dunking several of us in the dunk tanks. Thank you, guys.
Oh, boy. Now, that sounds like fun. Seeing no other comments, I want to make a couple of comments, actually. I, too, am excited about this. Been listening to the AWC consortium for a while about, what's happening elsewhere, and it's certainly happening here now. Just as earlier this week or last week, my days, I attended a meeting at Public Works, and those haven't been happening. I'll blame COVID, and it was nice to get together. And I sat beside John, who I have heard nothing but good comments about, and it's great to see somebody who was in another division, recognized for his talents, his energy, and his excitement about this to transfer into something still connected, certainly to the water division. But it's a great example of just opportunity that can happen when you apply yourself, and John certainly has. I sat beside him. I did not know John until I introduced myself, asked him how long he'd been for the city. He said 7 years. I was a little embarrassed about that. And then when I realized that, he was in the water division out, checking meters and those kinds of things that they do. But I had heard about John and the fact that, his talents could help us in an area here. And what a great example. So thanks, John. Thanks, Alex and Steve and I know Mick Monken was also instrumental in recognizing this talent and this, opportunity. So thank you. It's going to be exciting. And I know that what we will be able to do online, I'm going to need a lot of lessons, but I sure look forward to it. So thank you to the both of you. That's really good to see. And to Steve also. Okay, then I guess with that, we'll go to item B under engineering, which is revisions to water code. And it looks like we've got the same group here. I know Director Steve is with us right here in this room. And it looks like Alex, as our city engineer, will do the presentation. Alex?
Yeah, I will do it with, again, John's support. And just real quick before we move on, it sounds like we're going to put some links up on our webpage for the GIS.
Perfect.
So, without any objection.
We've got thumbs up here.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the kind words. So this is kind of in line with what David Cool presented earlier, housekeeping. So we don't often make changes to our code for utilities, but this is one that really is just it's needing to come up to the times of what the current regulations are. So we've been enforcing these regulations for approximately 6 years, I believe, and this is just cleaning up our code. So the mouthful of the title is Ordinance Number 1947, amending Oak Harbor Municipal Code, Section 13.28.040, and adding Chapter 13.29 with Sections 13.29.010 and 13.29.020. And as these are water infrastructure updates, I thought John would be a great candidate to present the detailed information. So John, take it away.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Council and Mr. Mayor, for your kind words earlier. So yes, this is a presentation to you for an ordinance to update our water section code. Just for some background on our water system for you, the city provides an average of 1.6 million gallons of potable water each day to our residents, our visitors, and our businesses. Of course, the infrastructure itself is maintained by the Water Division of our Public Works Department. And our last major updates to our municipal code regarding specifics of the water infrastructure actually occurred all the way back in 1975. Since then, there have been several advances in technology, materials available, and national design standards. And so it is prudent to have council permit the Public Works Department the flexibility to adapt to those advances and to provide for the reliable delivery of our safe potable water to our community. So this proposal's aim is to benefit the city's future growth by providing for a well-maintained, modernized, and orderly managed water infrastructure system to serve our community, and that is in line with the American Water Works Association and our current engineering practices. Presently, Section 1328.040 of the Oak Harbor Municipal Code reads that standard water mains shall not be less than 6-inch diameter of pipe. Pipes of smaller size may be used when the city supervisor determines that maximum fire rating can be maintained and the line in question cannot be extended. And then it goes on, for all pipes shall be designed to withstand a minimum internal pressure of 150 pounds per square inch and shall conform to the latest adopted standards of the American Water Works Association. And that all design standards, quality standards, and pipe sizes shall conform to the latest fire underwriter standards and requirements. And water mains shall be asbestos cement, cast iron, ductile iron, or approved equivalent material. There are numerous items in the section of code that do need to be addressed and updated. First, in subsection 1, with the standard water main sizes are sized according to the needs to provide for both the fire suppression that our fire department relies upon and our domestic water use demands. The old standards of a acceptable size of 6-inch diameter are no longer sufficient to meet those items. The 8-inch diameter of pipe is now the standard size that can meet the flow requirements that best provide for fire suppression efforts and also those domestic water uses. The next item in the list here is subsection number 2. It's our design standards have evolved since 1975. Our water system should be designed to withstand pressures that can accumulate from rapid changes in rates of water demand, and that's also termed water hammer, which is a surge of pressure that can cause pipe bursts, which can be costly not only in terms of the lost water itself, but also in terms of damage to other infrastructure, such as roads. Internal pipe water pressures can spike in excess of 150 psi, especially in areas within significant pressure gain from elevation, such as downtown and Pioneer Way and along Southeast Bayshore. Also in areas where the pipe diameter changes frequently and pipes have aged significantly, such as along West Whidbey Avenue. To better serve our customers and to better conform with the water use efficiency goal, which is less than 6% water loss to non-revenue sources, which are water leaks, we require stronger pipe classifications and materials, and so that is warranted. We already require these things in our development review process. This is a matter of updating the code to reflect those changes. And also, the organization known as the fire underwriters, referenced in the old subsection number 2, it's a defunct organization and it doesn't exist anymore, so we should eliminate those references to it. Subsection 3 of the section of code lists approved pipe materials. First off, asbestos cement as a pipe is no longer available to anybody. And cast iron itself does not have sufficient strength to withstand those pressures that I was discussing with you just a moment ago. So I have some proposed new text, and that is for 1328-040 for specifications for standard water mains. It's right here on the screen. They shall not be less than 8-inch diameter pipe. We may consider 8-inch diameter pipe if the city engineer with the fire chief and the public works director all agree that that can be a reasonable request to use a smaller diameter water main for a specific section of time. So it's a case-by-case basis. Number two, all water mains should be constructed to withstand a minimum internal pressure of 235 pounds per square inch. This would account for those increased demands. So if we're downtown and our firefighters are involved in a large fire downtown and they're opening up a fire hydrant, that surge doesn't happen upstream of that and break that pipe. The 235 PSI rating is our standard classification for the pipe materials that are commonly used today. And so our code should come up to reflect that as well. Water main design standards will conform to the latest adopted standards of the American Water Works Association and the National Fire Protection Agency. These are two different organizations. The NFPA, of course, makes the specifications that relate to fire protection and fire services, and the American Water Works Association guides the standards for all providing potable water and also fire suppression water throughout various water mains shall only be constructed using materials approved by the engineer and listed in the published water construction notes and standards. This allows the notes and standards to be updated routinely as new materials become available, as new standards become updated, and so that reduces the requirement that we come back to council periodically for a code update. It grants the engineer and the public works department the freedom to be able to pursue those latest standards. Moving along, I also am proposing that we add a new subchapter to section 13, which is chapter 29 with sections 010 and 020. And these items are to ensure that the process for decommissioning and removing our obsolete and aged water system components is properly codified. Decommissioning of those components should not conflict with the current water system plan, and they should follow our prescribed requirements. So, of course, I have a title for it, Decommissioning Water Mains and Services, Conformity to Water System Plan. Any proposal for development or redevelopment or any other action taken or requested to be taken to decommission a water main or water service shall not conflict with the water system plan. And then the actual item dealing with decommissioning of the water mains and services. Water mains that are decommissioned shall be removed from the ground and disposed of, or unless they are otherwise prohibited by the federal, state, or other regulations, a water main that is decommissioned may be abandoned in place with the approval of the city engineer pursuant to a couple of conditions. The first one being is that they must be shown on the record drawings, and those need to be provided to the engineer within 30 days of the conclusion of the work, and that they are to be abandoned and left in place, have to have the ends filled with a minimum of 2 linear feet of controlled density fill material, and that material must be cured in the pipe for a period of 24 hours before we fill in the excavation. Then for the water services side of the house, where possible, those water services that are decommissioned need to be disconnected from the water main with the tapping saddle removed and replaced with a repair band. The service line, meter box, etc., and all the other supporting items must be removed, and appropriate repairs to the surfaces must take place. So if we're having to, say, remove a water meter that is serving a property, say, along Midway Boulevard, for instance, we would want that entire service line that the city is responsible for, from the main to that meter box, we would want all those items removed from the ground, and then the surfaces, the sidewalk where the meter box is, the pavement across it, we would want all those things restored to their existing conditions prior to that abandonment. And if there are any other alternative methods to decommission that, we can approve those on a case-by-case basis, is what item number B covers. know that that was a lot to go over, and that there was a lot of information that I just kind of dumped on you right there, but that is the gist of what the proposal is for here. And so I will be happy to answer any questions that council or other staff may have.
Thank you, John. Do you know when this will come forward to council for approval? Do you know if there's a date set or a plan?
Defer that to my boss.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alex?
I believe we are intending to bring the ordinance to council at the next formal council meeting, so May 3rd.
Okay. So I'll turn to council for questions or input. Not seeing a lot. Looks like, okay, no questions at this point. So that's, thanks for the report. A lot of work there, and thanks for a lot of hard work, and we appreciate that again. So with that, we'll turn to our last item, which is under administration, city administrator's report. Mr. Oborn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council. I'm Blaine Oborn, Carver City Administrator, and it's nice to come on at 4:10 instead of about 7:10 like I did last time. So I have an opportunity to go a little bit more detail, and
You don't have 3 hours, though.
I don't have 3 hours. I've got 3 minutes, and I'll try to do like example of John Pollock did a great job of covering a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I'll try to do the same thing. I'm just going to highlight some of the areas I want to focus on verbally and provide a few updates there. So legislative outreach, we continue to work on some grants through Representative Larson's office. So we have hopefully some good news coming out there and making some grants onto the short list as we move forward with that process there. We'll keep you updated and as we gain more information on the success of those grants as they go through the grant process here, and probably come to the council at some point for formal approval of them. So we kind of had to go on a fast track, and so we had to come up with 3 alternatives fairly quickly. Staff did a good job of working on it, and we're working through that process. Then one thing in the administration area, the mayor just appointed Council Member Marshall as the council liaison for the Arts Commission. I think that's one of the boards and commissions that we haven't had a liaison on, so it made sense to do it. It's not a voting member, and it's similar to the way it works in the park department, but it's really good to have a council member at those meetings and can kind of convey information back to the whole council. So progress there. The Windjammer improvement, staff did a great job of hosting 2 community open houses, and the second one was a lot more people came. Probably about 30 people came to the second one, so some great, I know it was probably only around 5 or 10 in the first one, so we had with the mailer going out, and so we had some great input there, and I think the number of people answering the surveys is probably double too, so a lot of community input there as we go forward and look at where to go with our Windjammer Park improvement plan. Moving on to information technology, it's kind of a back-end kind of issue here with the IT server, but that's something that's been talked about since I've been here, and it just happened this weekend. We're all on new servers, so great effort there to our IT staff and our support organization, and Sabrina Combs has got to commend her for her efforts there and really taking that on and overcoming a lot of obstacles that made this drag out. So certainly with the new servers, we have a lot more capability and being modern and so can support other infrastructure. So great news there. So development services, the new permitting system is due to go online on May 9th, key date there. So more information that would be hopefully as part of that, helpful with staff and also help with the public. Finance Department is working closely with Senior Services and Park and implementing the Civic Rec. That's another tool that would help people in doing the shelter reservations and getting a lot of that stuff automated online. So great progress there. The fire department is has, well, this says three controlled burns, but one of them's already happened since we've done that, and so they have 2 left. And so, based upon council input from the last meeting, it was a great success there. And so, but 2 more to come. So great learning opportunity, and Chief's doing an excellent job there. Human resources, the attorney position was advertised, and so the results, it's closed, and so now we have a meeting of the subcommittee to meet next steps on May 2nd, and then we'll come to the council, get direction from the committee, and come to the council on transitioning from our interim attorney to hopefully a full-time designated permanent attorney. So on to Marina. The boat launch ramp is open, but it doesn't have the dock. Public Works pulled it out, so it's a little harder to launch without a dock, but people are figuring it out and making it work. It's better than having no place to launch it. So we'll continue to work on that. I don't have a date on the repairs, but we're working on that, and have our engineering firm that we've dealt with other issues is kind of helping us through the logistics there. So, and then just a quick update on the fish rearing. The fish are doing really well, and we have a release date of May 12th at 10 a.m. On May 12th. So if you want to see 30,000 fish, 15 in each, go out into the bay. It's a great time to do it, and it's a great success. And I just talked to Chris today, and the fish are doing really well. And so they were looking at late May, and so it looks like fish are doing so well, the release is going to be in mid-May. There. So, and then on to the police department. I thought I'd try to cover a key point in each of the departments here. Island County is working with the police department in doing some behavioral health support. I think that's really important there. And then Public Works, under the Public Works, I know a number of city staff, Navy, and community support supported the Earth Day cleanup on April 22nd. And I know the mayor and I you saw us on the street, on Erie Street, looking for trash on the side of the road. And unfortunately, there was plenty to pick up. But great community effort and great effort there, and coordination from Public Works in doing that community pickup. And appreciate the Navy and city staff and other community people that participated in that. Then also on the wet fiber, City Anacortes is on Fadago Island is doing the installation there. So there is some traffic delays, and I happened to run an errand in the middle of the day and got stopped, and personally, it wasn't too long, but sometimes they have to go down to one lane because the water lines that they're doing the saddles in to put in the wet fiber are in the middle of the road. So that's been a long project to get into construction, and this is the first phase. There's quite a other phases they're doing. They're putting the saddle, then they have to do a few other phases, but it is great progress there. And then additional here in Public Works, at the council meeting, we did have an individual that brought about issues of the Coochie Park, and the staff. The 3 departments are all working together to coordinate solutions to the issues there with public safety in that Coochie Park. And then lastly, senior services, we do have a new employee, Christina Benjamin, and started on April 11th as our program assistant. So that concludes my report. Certainly there's a lot of other information in there that I didn't cover, and I'll take any questions you have.
Councillor Stuckey.
I guess mine is a little more for our police chief. Could you expand a little bit on the embedded behavioral health worker, what that person's going to be doing, how they're going to work with our police department?
Sure, can you hear me okay, or you want me to?
You got to go to the mic, Chief. The people at home won't be able to hear you. So.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm going to come up here more. So Island County has obtained a grant to fund this position. I believe it's for a 3-year period of time. They did this on their own, certainly talked to us about it. We've had employees from Island County in the past for certain periods. We've shared shared that resource, so to speak, with their funding and operating. Anyways, back to this, when they've applied for a grant, got the funding for a full-time position, they'll actually have two of these people in this position. One's going to be working strictly with the county out of Coopville, doing county behavioral health type of services. The other one's going to be working out of our offices. We've got office. In fact, we're putting together a desk right now for him, for this person, and they'll be working out of our office. They are a county employee, but they'll be working full-time from our office, working with our officers, pairing up with one of our Special Services Division officers and other officers to, the intent is to be proactive, to try to make outreach to people that need the services, mental health problems or substance abuse type of problems, to office services and resources and the ability to outreach to see what they can do to get them into the resources available in the community within Island County and within the state to try to prevent issues or to get them the help. And then also reactive when necessary, when officers are encountering somebody in a crisis situation, to be able to go out and provide that resource and try to steer things away from being something that ends up being a criminal matter that has to go into a criminal system, if possible, and if not, if it still goes in there, to still provide that resource to try to divert that person at whatever point they can and work with our judicial system. The person is not going to be at the level where they can do involuntary commits. That's a different level, which this person is not, but they will have the credentials. We participated in an interview process for at least one candidate who applied for this. So if that person is the one they move forward with, which I believe it is, they will have, they've got very high credentials and can coordinate a lot of different things. So we're excited about it. It's for lack of a better, or the best terminology is an embedded mental health coordinated resource. So that's what we're looking at.
I just think it's pretty exciting because, we hear a lot about the homeless issue and stuff, and a lot of it is what I call the visible homeless, which is those dozen or so people that are right downtown that everybody sees, and many of them have mental illness. So if we're taking a proactive approach to try to get them services, I think it's a great thing. So happy
It
with
is.
update.
The cautionary note here is...
Of course.
Cautionary note is there's not going to be a miracle work thing, but you know what? Even if you're helping that one person out, you're making all those efforts. And whatever we can do to try to steer away from being a criminal entity, whatever we can do to try to help the citizens out there who are at risk and at need, and also those who are not, who are seeing these things pop up, the more we can do to do that is, and that's the way, the trend of today. Ideally, we'd have a bunch of them funded by state that we could count on, but this is a great step. Island County's done a great job with this, and we're eager to partner with them on it.
Councilor Hoffmeyer,
Expect away.
since we have the chief up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Councilor Stuckey, that this is something that several of us have talked about over time. I'm excited about this. I think this is a good thing. I'm going to hope that what I heard out of the Island County Human Services is inaccurate. I'm going to hope that this position wasn't funded by pooling from what we had available at the school, because I don't want us to be dropping the ball over on that side of things.
What we had available from the school?
So what I had heard from the county Human Services was that this position is being funded by taking away offerings that they had at the schools. So
I'm not aware of this. This is a totally a grant that the Island County Behavioral Health Services sought. I believe it was a new grant. I certainly didn't pull any money from anything resource that we have in the city.
Correct.
That I'm aware of.
Yeah, and I think it was on the county side of things. It came from a pretty good source, though. So.
Yeah, we can't control what they do on that end.
Correct.
So
It's
a benefit for us.
Very true, but like I said, excited about it as far as it goes with what we can control here. Thank you.
Any other, Councilor Evans?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I'm happy to hear that is happening, because looking at this report every single month, that typically seems to be the highest calls is mental health. So hopefully it will help reduce some time that the officers are having to spend with it, And I look forward to seeing what they do.
Okay. Any other questions for the city administrator on his report? Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, one more question, Blaine, and that is, it's very exciting to hear that the mayor appointed Councilor Marshall to be the Arts Commission liaison. When, out of our last meeting, it was pretty clear from council that we want to have a meeting with the Arts Commission and Sculptures Northwest. Do we have a date for that?
No, we do not. The mayor and I are in discussion. We're doing some preempted work ahead of time, but it's certainly making it a priority, and we'll move ahead with that. We may use a mediator to deal with that, somebody that's non-staff, kind of like a facilitator like we did with the retreat. So it kind of pulls some of the heat off the staff on that as we move forward. And I think we have 10 or maybe 3 council members that had expressed interest in being on that subcommittee. But it's on the fast track. I just don't have exact time, and we're just doing some other initial investigation before we move forward.
Awesome, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing no other questions, any other city council business? Anything you want to discuss? Yes, Councilor Evans.
Yeah, make sure y'all come out to Holland Happenings. I believe there's a fee that you don't even have to get the balls to throw at the dunk tank. You can just walk up and hit the paddle, so I look forward to seeing everybody come on down. I plan on raising some money.
It sounds like Councilor Evans may not be on the hot seat.
Definitely on the hot seat.
You are on, you
absolutely.
will be one of the donkeys.
Saturday, 4 to 6.
Wow.
Come on down and put me in the water.
Yeah, great.
Good
great.
cause.
By the way, I've been there, done that. So, yeah, I've got the T-shirt. I've been there, done that. Anyway, it's fun. You'll have a blast. Any other, seeing no other business, I thank everybody, especially hardworking staff, and thank council, of course, and